Today, I wanted to do a relatively short meeting where I'm going to be addressing some of the issues people have expressed regarding quizzes and some things that I'm seeing cropping up on some of the assignments. That's everybody is doing really, really well. There's some things that I think may be concerns that I want you to be aware of so that they aren't stressing you out. We have about 2 weeks. The final will be next Friday, and I wanted to talk a little bit about what that's going to consist of as well. And first, with the quizzes, it's interesting to me that there's always a a portion of people that somehow read the quiz questions quite a bit differently than what they're intended, and I get some really creative answers that don't have an awful lot to do with what I'm expecting or hoping. And I think that that's not a factor of miscommunication. It's just a factor of artists like us have brains that are unique, and other people may not necessarily know what to make of us all the time. But one of the things is one of the quizzes that I was grading, several people, when addressing the question of how size impacts a viewer, would only answer in general terms when the question asks you to respond to each of the three size examples shown. And in cases like that, if there's a correction on a quiz, several people have already taken advantage of this. You can either make a correction in the response or comment section where I'm responding to you, and or you can retake the quiz. And if whichever you choose to do, please email me and let me know that you've redone it, because the system doesn't always tell me. And if I know that you've redone it, then I'll go in, revamp it, the grading, and you'll get more points on the quiz. Another thing that I wanted to make sure that everybody understood is as you're going through these assignments, every once in a while people will miss a portion of what you're supposed to be turned in, and you're not going to get the points that you want. It's not because you're doing lousy work, it's because I've asked for, say, three different things for the submission, and you've only included two of them. A lot of the times when I'm in go through and do grading on the discussions, even though the discussions aren't due yet, I will grade what I see. And then as soon as you put in the comments and stuff like that, just email me and I'll go back and adjust the grade. It's not a big deal. I have had students get upset before because they said, well, it wasn't even due. And that's fine. And I haven't even turned the grades in. So you don't have a finished grade yet. Um, if you see a partial grade on a discussion, go and look. A lot of the times that's because you are ahead of the curve and have submitted your images, and nobody else has submitted images for you to comment on. So you can't do the second part. And as soon as you do that second part, let me know, and I will go in and adjust your grade. Another thing I wanted to let everybody know too is that if you are not happy with any of the assignments, for example, this happened quite a bit, not quite a bit, for about three people on the first one where we did photography of the little houses. They weren't happy with what they were seeing, and in one case, it was because when they submitted the images, they were submitted as the wrong kind of file that my computer can't read, and so I think one case over the weekend, somebody did that. They turned around, changed the files, and within an hour, they had sent me the right files, and I was able to grade it. Another thing to think of too, if you're not happy with a grade, and I say, well, I would suggest doing this and this to change whatever it is you've submitted, go ahead and make the changes and then resubmit. On all of the assignments, you can resubmit an infinite number of times. Of course, if you choose to do that, it's going to take quite a while. But each time you submit and it responds to what I've said, the grade goes up. Another thing to consider, though, as well, is sometimes I'm not seeing what's going on. one person in contemporary processes last year, what I saw was just a vase full of paper flowers, and it was just not really that spectacular. And I told her that. She had forgotten to write how the process was done. And when she explained to me everything that went into it and the time that was involved, because it was a contemplative process, it wasn't just following directions from an online magazine to make paper flowers, it completely changed the nature of what she was doing. So when I ask for explanations or things like that, please make sure that you remember to put those on. And if you feel that I wasn't paying attention to what I should have been, write down in the comments, well, this is what you needed to be looking at. Of course, if you do it politely, I respond better. And I try really hard to be polite as well. I wanted to mention as well that watching videos, I I email these to people, and I see about half the class are actually watching the videos. I recommend highly that you do watch the videos. I think we have about 4 or 5 right now. I'm going to do another one later this week, and then I every day I will email, excuse me, as a reminder for the final. What I need, what I was hoping that some people would be on this one video, because I need some feedback about the time for the final. Right now, it looks like it's going to be in the mid to early afternoon, because that's when I can do it. Everybody needs to go through the final interview. It's not going to be a test. I have 4 questions that I ask, and we'll record them and we'll talk about them. I need as many people as possible in that final. If you can't make it, we've got to figure out a different time and do that do it at a different time. The video interview at a different time. The interview is about, if it's just a one-on-one thing, it's going to be anywhere from 4 to 10 minutes. But we need to get as many people on the face-to-face as possible, because that makes that final process an awful lot better for everybody involved. So there'll be more on that. I'm thinking it's going to be Friday the 12th at 3:30 is what that's when I can do it. So I would really appreciate it for everybody who gets this email talking about this video, watch the video and respond to that and let me know when is best for you. If that will not work, we've got to sort that out this week. If you cannot make it at that time, I need to know when we post the actual time for it, just as rapidly as possible. If you wait, I've had this happen. One person called in while she was in the bathroom of an airport saying that she couldn't make the final. That makes it rather difficult. I have had students that have had emergencies come up and weren't able to tell me until the next day. And when it's an emergency, that's one thing. I've also had several students who were not able to make it, and found out pretty much a little bit beforehand that they weren't able to make it, and we were able to make other arrangements. Last semester, we had one person who had just had a child. She called in and took part in the final through the speaker of one of her friends in the class, and she was able to respond via phone. So I'm happy to make accommodations and help people out, but it is vital, if you do not have a final interview with me for this class, the department mandates that you lose a full letter grade, which really, really sucks. So don't let that happen. One thing I really appreciate too is that one student needed to have a one-on-one Zoom call with me, and she was able to point out a couple issues that Canvas is having. I have edited this class, and from my end, everything looks good. What she found was that the syllabus page was not updating. So we got rid of that page. So now the syllabus is only in the first module of the class, which is Introduction to the Class, and it says syllabus for 3D design. And she pointed out a couple other things that we were able to work on, and everything's working now as far as I can tell. if there's issues, if you can't access something, instead of waiting until next week and letting me know and you're in a panic, tell me as soon as you possibly can, please. And everything is graded. And like I said, if you're not happy with the grade, it's totally fine to reassess, readdress whatever it is that you're doing. If it's a quiz, reassess what you're doing. Most of the time when people get questions wrong, it's one of two things. It's because they fill in the blank and they haven't spelled it right, or it's because it's a question that seems pretty easy, but they did not refer to the text. Remember, these are open book quizzes. There's really not any reason why you shouldn't be referring to the text to get the answer. One good example is according to the text, what's the simplest definition of a line? When somebody doesn't read the text, they give me a definition that comes right out of our math classes growing up, and that's not the correct answer. So whether or not you're in doubt, make sure that you're referring to the text for the quizzes. And if you need to change answers, you can retake the quiz an infinite number of times, or you can make the changes as a comment. And then once you do that, email me and let me know. And that seems to be working pretty well. I also heartily recommend that everybody go through. I have finished grading for everything that's been turned in to right this point. So I want everybody to go through, look at the grades that they've received. Sometimes you miss assignments, and if they're like a week late, I'll put a 0 in and just say, please submit for points. I know everybody's busy. Just do the very best that you can and get those submitted as soon as you can. One person had to join the class about a week late, and they've been doing really well. So I'm not for this summer class and strictly online. I know that everybody takes this because they're super busy, and I don't want to add to the stress by being unreasonable about due dates. So do the very best you can, and let me know when you resubmit something so I can make sure that the grade is updated. Now, for the last discussion, the real discussion, the third discussion that we have, one of the discussions is part to the ready-mades assignment. And in that, it's not really a discussion. What you're doing is just posting an image of your ready-made with a description about how you arrived at that. And that must include a title. Some people have turned that in without including a title, and I've mentioned that. So make sure that you have a title included in your description. It doesn't always show up on the photo that you post in the discussion board. Once you do that, let me know, and I'll add the points on for that. But for this very last discussion of the class, everybody is posting their sculpture with the 3 textures and the color scheme added. And it's not spray painting, it's a solid color. It's one of the color schemes that you worked with, which is if it's achromatic, then it's in scales of gray. If it's monochromatic, then it's in scales of another color. But it has to be painted, and it can't all be spray painted the same color because that's not in the assignment. Once you have that posted, when you pick another person's work to do a critique on, I wanted to just go over really quick the 4 steps of that, and then do an example with a random item that I pick off my desk. The 4 steps of critique are description, analysis, interpretation, and judgment. One thing you'll notice as you go through this is that description is something that is very, very matter of fact and doesn't include any of you really at all. You're just saying what the object is. Judgment, on the other hand, comes entirely from you. And each of these 4 steps, we go through that spectrum of slowly adding more and more of our own unique perspective into the mix as we critique something. The first step, description, you're talking about the physical parameters of the object, what it looks like, how big it is, what style it's in. Second, analysis, we inject a little bit of ourselves as we're assuming or projecting what the artist may have done to get the effects that they did, how they may have carved it, how they may have applied a texture, how they may have torn bits from a magazine to make a collage. We're not, we're imagining what they did, but we're not really talking an awful lot about ourselves at that point. When we go to interpretation, not only are we imagining what they did, but now we're projecting onto them the reasons for what they were doing. So this includes quite a bit of our perspective. Maybe the day that you're doing a critique, you're really upset and you notice some jagged lines that may or may not have been purposefully jagged. And your interpretation is that these jagged lines somehow reflect the irritation of the person creating the object. And that's completely valid because it's interpretation. Your points for this part of the exercise come from following the rules of our tools of artistic critique, following the outline that's on that page that I've sent to everybody that's in your Canvas course, and examining those questions critically and intelligently. Whether or not you agree with me on a critique has absolutely no bearing. Whether or not you can articulate what you see, following those 4 steps does. So and the 4th step is evaluation, judgment. Are we thinking that this object is valid as a work of art? Are we thinking that it's important? Is it successful? That is entirely your perspective. So you can see of those 4 steps, description, analysis, interpretation, and then judgment, each one adds more of us into the mix as we look at and examine this object. I sent another link to the video where 2 art historians look at Henry Moore's reclining figure. I really want you to watch that, watch it a couple times, and see what they're doing. At the beginning, they look at it and they don't really seem too impressed with it. And as they start asking questions and examining it closer with a critical eye, now critical does not mean that they want to tear it apart. Critical means you are examining purposefully, not hurtfully. So as they are examining it with a critical eye, they're asking questions, they're making assumptions, they're drawing more of themselves out and into that object so that it becomes more accessible to themselves. And by the end of that 6-minute video, the object itself has completely changed, not because the object is physically different, but because in the view of the people looking at it, it has become something completely different. And this is the process that we want to go through. As you do your response to somebody else's artwork in that last discussion, what you're going to be doing is spending a couple minutes or a couple sentences on each of those 4 questions, or 4 steps. Each of those 4 steps have questions to consider, and I want you to consider at least 1 or 2 questions from each of them. And some of these are easier than others, that's fine. But the object that I'm going to pick is this roll of toilet paper. If we look at it from the description point of view, that's the first step in the rules, tools of artistic critique. This is about, I'm going to say maybe 4.5 inches tall. The diameter is probably about the same, about 4.5 inches. It has a hole in the middle of it that is about 1.5 inches in diameter, right there. And it appears to be made from a cardboard tube in the center that is wrapped with this rather fascinatingly regularly perforated paper. So the paper is not a regular paper that you could use to write on unless you're truly desperate. It feels like it's intended to be absorbent and break apart really easily, which kind of seems odd to me because if I'm thinking absorbent, I'm thinking something I want to clean up and I want it to be a little bit sturdier. But that's the way it is. And I also noticed that on this, you can kind of see a little bit, there's something of a quilted design. It looks to be like interlocking circles in basically a 4-phase design where each circle has 4 other circles locked onto it. And then the center of these designs either make little stars or tiny squares where the circles come together. I would say if we look at this as, what kind of style of art it is, it's rather minimal. It's rather minimalist. It's just a very simple shape. The colors don't appear to be applied. They appear to be just the natural material that was used to construct this. The one interesting thing is that in that center cardboard tube area, in the hollow area, there seems to be a spiral, where if we go from the one end looking into it, the spiral seems to be counterclockwise, which is interesting to me. So that's a description of this. And we've addressed several of the questions. What's the size? What's the material made out of? Is there a style that the artwork is constructed in? Now, obviously, this is a roll of toilet paper. It's not, well, maybe it's not somebody's idea of a particular art piece, but that's something that we're going to address a little bit later. However, the reason why I picked something that is not easily identifiable as a sculpture is that I want to show you that these steps can apply to absolutely anything. Now, as we analyze this, how is it made? Well, it looks like to me, and I look over the top of my glasses because I'm a grandpa, it looks like to me that the paper itself is carefully constructed, but it's not hand-shaped. It feels like it's machine-made, which starts making me think of things like Marcel Duchamp's ready-made. Many of those were machine-made as well. And I'm thinking that the accuracy on this is pretty consistent for a machine, but if we look at the perforations on the edge there, it looks like it's done without real intent. So I don't, maybe this is, the perforations are something that are machine made as well, where this is set up as on a revolving die or something like that, and it's done as part of a process without human intervention. I mentioned that spiral in the center. It appears to me that there may very well be these lines. This is so cut. This is cut so smoothly. It has to be done pretty sharply, and it doesn't look like there's an awful lot of human hand intervention in this. There's no maker's mark, so to speak. So I'm thinking that whoever made this either made it through machine tools only, or maybe developed a program for a machine to follow their directions to construct something, because this feels like it's been very constructed in a very industrial manner. Okay, so that's analysis, where I'm kind of guessing at what the process was, or how the artist made whatever it is that they made. Now, if we go into, and I've injected a little bit myself because I've used my imagination. I've kind of pondered, well, how could these effects be made? Now, if we look at this and start moving into interpretation, this is where I'm kind of guess what the artist meant by what they were doing. What is the artist's intent? Whether or not your audience can read the intent as you hope for really does not make an awful lot of difference as to whether or not the work of art is successful. It's successful if it engenders a realm of communication. And whether or not that is exactly as you intended matters a whole lot less than what you might think. Just like any other conversation we have with anybody, our intent for a conversation is secondary to the fact of the human interaction of the conversation many times. Now, of course, that's different if you see somebody speeding down a bike, losing control, and they're heading right towards a really terrible pothole and they're going to get hurt. But most of the time when we have a conversation, a two-way conversation, the intent of what we want to communicate is often changed and altered by the process of the communication itself. So it becomes secondary to the fact of the human interaction. Now, as we go to interpretation, I'm wondering, this seems really monolithic and almost inaccessible. It seems like it doesn't really say an awful lot. It reminds me of modern art, which was all about what the thing was and very little about what the content was. You get blocks and shapes, and odd-shaped things that people just respond to, forcing them into an internal discussion about what makes art art, as opposed to making them think about this particular thing. And I feel that my interpretation is that the artist, if there was an artist behind it, intended for this to be more of a functional type thing and more and less of a political statement, for example. And as a function, I would imagine that this, having these perforated at regular intervals, having them look like they are absorbent but break down really easily. I would think that in sort of a fluid environment, the volume of this would collapse rather readily, perhaps, and be squished down quite a bit. So my assumption is that this is designed as to be part of a waste product removal process where it itself breaks down organically as well. So using it's not very effective for cleaning like tables or pots and pans, because I don't feel that this is very sturdy, but maybe for softer areas. But my interpretation of this is that whoever did it really liked the circle. And I think that paper tube is designed not so much to be practical beyond the realm of holding this more disposable material. So maybe the practicality of the paper tube is also because at some future time it can be torn down and used in desperation as well. I'm sure that none of us have ever had that experience. But thinking what the creator intended, I'm thinking that it's going to be more of a practical application, or if this is presented as an object of art, I'm thinking that they really want the observer to consider how much of the presentation of a piece of art makes the object a piece of art. But as far as direct communication with the artist, I don't see that this is really accessible. But it is something that makes you think and ponder. Now, if we judge or evaluate this, which is the fourth and final step, as a practical use material, this seems to make a lot of sense. And I think it does work. I mean, as long as this paper is dry, it retains its strength and durability. The moment it starts becoming being impacted with moisture, it starts falling apart. So I think that if it's intended to be used quickly on a soft surface for rapid cleanup, then it is successful. I think if it is intended to be durable in like a camping situation where you have to scrub a pot, it's not successful at all. But as far as practical for soft surface cleanup of a short time duration, I think that this is practical and it does work. So I think it's successful in that. As far as art, if this is put on a pedestal, I think it would be successful only insofar as it would force viewers to begin a dialogue about what is art and how much of the element of presentation come into helping us define something that's art, and also asking questions of, do we have a right to question when somebody else presents something as art? I think we do have a right to question that. Is there a dialogue there? Is the artist always the last voice, or is the art historian always the last voice? I don't think they should be. I think the viewer needs to be part of that vocal process as well, that part of that conversation. Now, as far as making marks showing human interaction, this is not very successful because all the marks seem to be industrial. But as a practical object, I believe that this is successful. As a work of art, I think this is a little bit less successful, and I would want to see it in order for it to be successful. I would want to see it in the end presentation space to see how the artist is presenting it to force those kind of conversational questions. All right, so we don't have yes or no answers for any of these questions dealing with those 4 steps. But you saw that I was able to go through those 4 steps: discussion, analyze, interpretation, and judgment, with a roll of toilet paper. All you need to do is refer to that sheet, have that sheet in front of you, and use it as a guide. The sheet I'm talking about is the page that shows tools of artistic critique. Have that in front of you as a guide. And when you look at the artwork of one of the other students, when you pick that, go through all the parameters and answer at least some of those questions for each of those 4 steps. If you guys have any questions about that, let me know. I think that the next meeting is probably going to be about Thursday evening, is what I'm hoping to do. So hopefully that will work better than today. I'm the only one in this meeting, which was nice because I didn't have any violent confrontations, which is always good. But I will record this, I will put it on YouTube and send that link to everybody. And I would like everybody to ponder about that time. The proposed time is 3:30, Friday the 12th of August, for our final discussion. You'll notice that I tried to cram in due dates so that everything is due before then. And I will, every day from now until the final, I will be grading what I see coming through Canvas. And if you need to redo anything, if you need to make comments on anything, if you need to reassess anything, you should have I hope that you will have plenty of time to do that between now and then. If you have any questions, email me and let me know. I may not respond directly to the email, but we will put that in to the next video. All right. Thank you. I hope you guys had a wonderful weekend, and I look forward to visiting with you all soon.